Hi, welcome. So Kenny and I in this session, or rant, we're not sure yet, because, well, people just behave, but we don't know what we're going to do. But we're going to talk about collaborative software design and how to facilitate domain modeling decisions. So we're also going to talk about collaborative modeling. We are going to do this from a socio-technical perspective, meaning we're going to highlight both the technical side and we're also going to rant about humans. So that will be the fun part. And to make it even more fun for you, yes, it's working. And because we know that stories work, we are going to use our fictional company called Big Screen to guide you through this story. And we also use this fictional company in the book that we wrote together with Gien, and it really helps if you have a tangible scene that makes it more relatable to talk about the topics that we discuss in the book as well. So Big Screen is really a collection. It's based on truth. It's not based on a company. It's based on all of our experiences and observations that we've had, the three of us together, in the past years. And Big Screen is a international cinema chain with locations across 12 different countries, I believe, that we said in the book. And they are dealing with some challenges. And one of the biggest pains in their asses is the streaming services growth. And they want to do something about that. They want to keep up with the competition and maybe even staying ahead of the competition. But they have some problems. And one of their problems is this. They are dealing with this, design. You could call it a design.
It is design.
It is a design.
Yeah.
And they are dealing with this. And this thing comes with a lot of challenges, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a social perspective. Because if you're dealing with this, then you can imagine that you will also have to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations about features and that they take longer and longer, or they are too expensive, or they cannot be implemented at all. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to have these conversations with people because there will be conflict and disagreements and grudges and opinions and perspectives and judgments, and that's not comfortable for us. So Big Screen is also dealing with this. So from a technical side and a social side. And what it does, these kind of conversations and the things that they're dealing with, it also leads to a lot of frustrations. And you can imagine, because if you are in those situations, you might imagine how frustrating that can be. But it also leads to polarization. And how you notice that is that people start to talk more and more in us versus them. And when you have that, and when that grows and grows, and when it continues, and when it starts to boil up, well, then it's very hard to get people back on the same page again. And if you want to do collaborative software design, the word says it, you have to collaborate. So if there's polarization going on, and the us versus them thing is very strong, then it's very hard to get people aligned and on the same page. So that's a problem too. And to be clear, this goes for everyone involved. So this is not just a development team thing or the business, whatever it may be. But this goes for everyone. And everyone is dealing with these frustrations in their own bubble, from their own perspective, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And we ignore it for too long, and then we expect people to do something together. Well, that can be very hard. So luckily for Big Screen, there were 3 experts on collaborative software design that were willing and able to help them. And this is very much fast forward, but this is eventually where we got. And we got there by doing a lot of collaborative modeling and really focusing on both perspectives, the technical side, but also helping them and facilitating all of the human sides of things. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How did we get there and what happened in between? What are some of the main challenges that you can encounter when doing this? What are we seeing? What is Big Screen dealing with? And that's what we're doing today, right?
Yeah, so that's what we help companies with. We try to help them through collaborative modeling, through collaborative software design, deal with these big balls of muds and legacy and in modernization. So a few things from a value perspective, we believe that teams should design, build and run systems. So not only build and run, but the whole value stream, right? This comes from a team-first perspective from team topology. And this is a great, I like this one from John Cutler, right? We believe and we try through collaborative modeling to get people down and down and down towards product teams, where they can get the opportunities and that they can go through requirements planning, designing, building, testing, releasing, and running. That's a little bit of the value that we believe in and where we want to go to. However, there's a small problem there, and I hope this is going to work, but it's not going to quickly. So what happens if you don't? If teams are more up, only agile, and we get a game of telephone. Who's seen this before? Game of telephone? Who's done it before?
It also works with spoken things, right?
Yeah, so fast forward a little bit here. what you will see is, this is a visualization, right? And it's more of a funny joke, but this actually happens in companies who are not really aligned to, or not having teams that are within the opportunities, right? Because during opportunity selection, design already starts. And there's already handovers. And that's what, in the domain-driven design community, we have this famous quote by Alberto, because it's not the domain expert knowledge that goes to production, it's the assumption of the developers that goes to production. And that's a problem, right? If we're building software and I don't understand what's happening, then shit will go to production, because there are assumptions there. And that's why we like to use collaborative modeling techniques, which is a visualization techniques to analyze complex and conflict-laden decision-making processes with all relevant stakeholders in decision-making to create a shared understanding. It's not coming from software design necessarily, by the way. There are people in the Netherlands and Bangladesh having a lot of research about how to manage water systems and plan water systems, and they use collaborative modeling as well. And we use it inside companies as well with specific tools. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A visualization technique, shared understanding, analyze complex and conflict-laden, and decision-making processes. So who have seen event storming? Who's ever done event storming? Great. I hopefully don't need to go too much into it. I'm going to tell you quickly how we try to approach, or how companies doing domain-driven design usually approach software design. So they get this visualization technique with event storming, with all stakeholders in the room, and it's great. It's what we call low friction. Event storming is not the only technique. You have domain storytelling, you have Wortley mapping, you have business model canvas, you have many of these tools that can help you. The essential tool of collaborative modeling, in my opinion, is to lower friction. Yes, it needs to be clear what you're modeling. There always needs to be a legend, but people should be able to do it quickly. If everyone would just understand Archimate, that would be nice, because then you can use Archimate, but usually that's just an architecture tool, and teams don't use it. So I never introduced that, even though I could do it in the past. So try to get tools that work frictionless. Try to get stakeholders on board. But important, there's always a legend, right? You need to understand what is. That's very important. So what we then usually do is, through that shared understanding, we try to model out some domains, and a domain is really an area of interest of which a person has control over. My quick metaphor, very reductionist thing, is like a shopping mall, or like a grocery shop, where you have your aisles, right? You have your pasta aisle, or your Italian aisle, you have your vegetable aisle, and then you have tomatoes sitting in multiple of these aisles, because it's not about the object, it's about what are you actually solving. So for me, domains are usually a sphere of knowledge where you try to solve things. So from these domains, is it still working? No. Yes, too fast. From these domains, we try to model out bounded context in domain-driven design, and that's where we try to find solutions, see that a little bit as the products that's on the shelf. It's not really one-on-one in that metaphor, but see it as a model to solve a specific problem in your domain. That's great. Again, this talk is not really about how to get there. We're going to move more towards the challenges of collaborative modeling. Now, if you get your event storming, you can then look at some heuristics to find some natural boundaries. So as I said, a domain or a bounded context is really looking at, okay, what problems are we solving in event storming? You see at the top, we have movie scheduling. At the top, we have ticketing, purchasing. That's a good start. And what we're going to do is we're going to move through that using heuristics to find different options, to find different domains and possibilities there. All through collaborative modeling. And then, in the end, I always see companies going to, this is our design. Right, Evelyn? So that's a quick run-through of how you would see these sessions go from a perspective of event storming. But I don't think that's a challenge. Usually I see companies getting here. There's a lot more design activities going on here. But as I mentioned, can we go to production now?
You could.
Push to production.
Yes, you could. But I think something could go wrong. And this is not a hard question, I think. So what could possibly go wrong? Humans, right? Because you also have to deal with the human part. So there's still a lot that can go wrong there. Yes?
No? It's still bugging?
This is also going wrong. That's nice. Oh yeah, so I have an assistant now.
I think it's bogging.
It was working.
Yeah. Ah, there we go.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. This was me
Connection
or you,
problems.
by the way? I don't know. We'll
was
see.
not humans.
So when you are on that boat and you are only seeing the top of the iceberg, you might think, well, smooth sailing, we can go, this is fine. But as you can see here, and maybe this metaphor is known to a lot of you, the iceberg, there's a lot going on underneath the surface line as well. And that's what you don't see. So you cannot know what you cannot see, right? So there's still a lot going on there. And usually everything that's happening in the unconscious part has to do with all these uncomfortable things like emotions and perceptions and judgments and all of the things that we, and conflict and disagreement that we don't necessarily like to deal with when we are collaborating with people. We kind of refer to these things that happen underneath the waterline, we like to refer to them as shadows, right? Because the iceberg is really a big ball of things that's happening underneath the surface line. And what we feel is that everything that is in there is really happening on an individual level, right? And sure, it affects the group, but you bring something to a collaborative modeling session or to any session at all. There's stuff going on that you don't necessarily explicitly share with the group, but you might feel a certain way about things, or you might be in a conflict with someone, or you might have a very personal relationship with someone, or there's just something going on at home that makes that you're not really there. So there's a lot going on in the shadows of people.
And you forget the most important part, how the cat is doing.
How the cat is doing. It's very important to know how the cat is doing, especially if they are sick.
Yeah.
But this is all, you bring that with you to a session. And whether we like it or not, this influences how we behave in sessions, and this influences the eventual outcome of sessions. So ignoring this and just dealing with what is explicitly there, then you're missing a lot of what's going on, and you probably don't get the full potential of the group in your eventual outcome. So we need to deal with that. And this is why we say that collaborative modeling really is a socio-technical happening. And we like that because it's really, well, it's challenging, but it's also fun to deal with, well, the human side and the technical side of things. But this is what we need to be aware of. We cannot just focus on one side of things. We have to focus both on the technical and the social part. And we are very often forgetting that, or are trying to do that and miserably failing at that. Because humans are always complex, and humans are always, well, making things way more challenging. And these are some of the things that you can think about as humans, because they have assumptions and they have personal relationships and interests, and they might be conflicting, and there might be all sorts of stuff going on that is heavily influencing the outcome of your software design. And this is heavily influenced by a lot of sociodynamics that are flying around, and these are some of them, and the balloons are there because I think it's a party.
Well, conflict is a party. You can learn a lot from it.
Not everyone thinks that, but I think it's a party. And these are some of them, and we're not going to dive into everyone today, but these are some of the sociodynamics that you really at least should be aware of, and how they are affecting whatever you're doing in a group, not just with collaborative software design. And the most important thing is that all of these dynamics are eventually influencing our behavior. And with that behavior, we are influencing what we eventually building. So understanding these, being aware of them, is a very important thing to do. Because, well, humans and their behavior. This is basically what we're going to talk about. The thing with behavior is that it's very hard to observe. We all think we're very good at that, but we're not. Not doing it in an objective manner, let's say. So my cat is a great example and a great practice thing to practice like the observing behavior in an objective manner on. Because, well, looking at this, he's laying like this a lot, and he's just looking around and yawning a bit and looking at me and then seeing the birds flying around. But that is what I'm observing, right? I'm observing that he's laying there, that he's looking at me, that he's looking around, that he's yawning. That's what I'm observing. My interpretations don't really matter, because maybe he's focused, maybe he's disengaged, maybe he's plotting an attack, maybe he's just judging me, as he usually does. But that's my interpretation, right? So, and this is what goes wrong when it comes to observing behavior. With humans as well. If we see someone looking out of the window, looking on their phones during a session, or distancing themselves from the group, we very often think, and very quickly think, oh, that person is disengaged. Not interested. You don't know that.
Hangry.
That's your interpretation. Angry, okay, that's a valid reason, but you don't know that. What you can observe is this person distancing themselves or looking at their phones. You have no idea why that is happening. So your interpretations and judgments, they don't really matter. And this is why it's really hard to observe behavior in an objective way. So to be clear, behavior is really what an organism does, or better, what an other organism observes it is doing. And that means that things like taking ownership, or autonomy, or being transparent is not behavior. And this is also where it goes wrong in organizations, right? Because we label a lot of things that we see as behavior, and then still there are a lot of interpretations, and then we are surprised that things don't go as we expected.
Yeah, be autonomous.
Yeah, do something, right? That's hard. So learning how to observe behavior in an objective way is a very useful skill to have. Because the behavior in, for example, collaborative modeling sessions could look like this. And you see the shocking reaction of the cat, but this is how I feel sometimes when I'm observing behavior in sessions, right? So what's happening? Who's taking the lead? Who starts talking first? Who's always the first one who throws in ideas? Who are silent? Who's hesitant to share ideas and perspectives? Or who's forming subgroups? All of these things, the objective behavior is happening in a collaborative modeling session, apart from the thing on the technical side that you're dealing with. And you will have to take care of all of that. So who recognizes this? That when you're in a session, some voices are very dominant, right? Some people are always talking first and present, and you think...
Loud.
And you think, wow, this person is very annoying. Right? Yeah, it can happen. And the thing again is, we are very quick with judging, right? Oh, this person really needs to get this attention, and he's always... but the behavior that you're observing, again, is, well, people are just talking more than others. And this particular thing also has to do a lot with ranking. And I shared a bit of that yesterday in the panel discussion, but there was not really enough time to go into that. But ranking really is about social hierarchy in a group. And whenever we enter a room or a context or a group, there is always a social hierarchy. And that's a good thing, because it helps us making sense of the world. And whenever we enter a group, we position ourselves compared to the others in the group. And we do that to ourselves. So that's one thing to remember. And we are all conditioned in a similar manner, so this is really context and culture dependent. But we are conditioned to see certain traits or characteristics or norms or whatever, to see them as more powerful than others, and we position ourselves based on that. So in our case, whenever we enter a training or a conference or whatever, usually he's higher in rank than I am. And that's fine, that's good, there's no judgment there. But it can affect behavior, right? So, for example, when we were doing a training, one person in a training was continuously directing all of the questions to Kenny, even if I just explained something. Hey, Kenny, what do you think about that? Hey, Kenny, can you explain something again? Kenny, what's your take on? Luckily, he was aware of this ranking thing going on. But if he wouldn't have been aware, then he might have been taking all of the questions, and it would make my behavior more going towards, okay, I will just stay quiet because apparently other people know way more about this than I do. And that would have been missing out on a lot of, well, valuable...
Well, I would say that would be missing out on a lot of valuable information you have, or at least know what you know, which is a lot. Yeah. Exactly.
So being aware of this going on is a very important thing. And this is the symbolic violence part. I kind of mentioned it, but this is how we are conditioned, right? We are conditioned that there are certain symbols of power that we all conditioned with, and when we see them, when we observe them, we base ourselves in the hierarchy based on what we see in these symbols. And we do that to ourselves. That's the violent part of this. Nobody else is doing that to you. You are doing that to yourself. And that's very important to remember.
Simple question. Who's ever entered a room, noticed that there's a person who's been in a company for 15 years and thought, okay, I'll stay quiet today? Yes, that's symbolic violence. Because who knows, you might have something very important to say, but you hold yourself back because you're thinking, hey, that person knows more.
Yeah.
That's the not the real violence, but the symbolic one.
Symbolic violence, yeah. So no physical violence here. And this can become a problem in collaborative modeling when people that are higher in rank are not aware of that, because then you can get something that's called dominance blindness. So in the example of Kenny and me with the person asking all the questions, if Kenny wouldn't have been aware of that this was going on, he was going to take all of the questions and just answer it and making me like smaller and smaller and smaller. But this happens a lot. So being aware of this going on is a very important thing. And then when you are aware of it, especially if you are higher in rank, we think that you have a responsibility to also share that rank, right? Because it's up to you then to think, hey, okay, so maybe I'm higher up in rank here, but there are still very valuable other perspectives that I want to include in the entire design that we have. So that means that you, if you're higher in rank, can simply ask people, hey, what do you think? Are there any alternative views? Instead of, this is my idea. Okay. right? So you can share your rank by simply asking and inviting others to join. Another thing, own your rank, right? So very often people say, yeah, we are all equal. And yes, we are equal, but we are still different, because some people are making decisions about budget and others don't.
Especially if you hold the budget, yeah. It would be very nice, right? If your manager comes up, we're all equal, but then the next day fires you.
Right?
Bit weird.
So yes, equal, but different. And you can play around with that rank. So this is just letting you be aware of what's going on here. Another dynamic that's very often happening in groups is resistance, right? Because resistance, and still it's a very container concept thing where there could be a lot of interpretations here. But a lot of behavior that we observe has something to do with resistance. And we want to give you a tool that you can use to at least start observing that resistant behavior in a more objective manner. So if you, for example, notice that in groups, more and more sarcastic jokes around the same topic pop up, or people start gossiping around a certain topic, or behavior that falls into one of these categories is popping up more, then that's usually a signal that there is something going on in those shadows that you probably want and need to address. So this is just a tool that you can use, a resistance line. It's also interesting to reflect on your own behavior on this line. What do you do? I
love disruption, if I don't feel heard. If someone takes a decision over me, I'm going to
then you're done.
Yeah.
And the thing is, resistance especially pops up when technical choices have social consequences. And it's, of course, also the other way around. But diving into an example, choosing a certain technology will increase a skill gap. So maybe this choice for technology is a great choice, but it will also increase insecurity for people maybe, because they think, well, I need to learn something new and I'm not good at that, and what will that do with me and with my position and my power and my whatever. So the insecurity might increase. You need to deal with that, because this can lead to resistant behavior, because maybe this person starts to make sarcastic jokes every time technology X is mentioned, or he's going to bash the technology every chance that he gets, or she, sorry. So this is the behavior that you then can observe, and maybe it's resistance, but it's usually a signal that you need to dive into something. So this is one of the best lessons that I learned from my cat. Observe with care before you fill the air. Right? So
we tried to translate it from a good Dutch saying. This is the best we came up.
But it really means that you should observe what's going on without your own judgment and interpretations. And that's really, really hard to do. Trust me, I still do it, but this is where you should probably start. Okay, it's working. So, social dynamics covered. Done.
Yeah. So we got the social dynamics, we got all that knowledge in, right? So now we can take a decision. Correct? Well, this still is not a decision because, well, you know, a decision is a choice between two or more alternatives that involve irrevocable allocation of resources. If I only have one option, it's not really a decision. It's like, oh, this is the model, right? We took a decision. No, you didn't. There's only one thing, right? Because there needs to be alternatives. Alternative is a path that will lead you to a different future. Even if the two options you have lead to the same feature, is it really a decision? Right? So often when we see modeling, and this is also Eric Evans and many people in the design community say, right, one option is not a design. You at least want to have three most of the time and look at their trade-offs. So oftentimes people started to do software design and started to do like modeling out. They usually only have one option, one alternative. And that, well, we want to generate more. Even though, and this is a good tip, try to model it wrong one time. I like that heuristic. Okay, model it how you don't want it to be, because then maybe you know better what you do want. And what would be what would be an outcome, a different future that you don't want to end up with, right? I had this one time before where they were all discussing one option, and then the moment I got something they didn't want, they found a third option. So we want to get these several options in, and a different thing is there needs to be irrevocable allocations of resources. Now, during New Year's Day, who has some promises to themselves? Who has like, oh, this year I'm going to go more to the gym? That's not a decision. It is a decision once you bought a subscription, because now I allocated money to a subscription, and if I don't get that back, then it's irrevocable. And that's what we mean with resources. Resources is time, money. Unfortunately, because this is from a economical framework, unfortunately also humans don't like to call them resources, but anything that is irrevocable, right? There's a cost of being wrong. Then you're dealing with decisions. Else it's just empty promises so far. Right? So we want to design these alternatives and find out what are the trade-offs and what path do they lead them to. And then through alternatives, we generate more alternatives. Maybe you've seen this before, right? Someone drops a new alternative in, and then all of a sudden someone goes in, oh yeah, but then I also have a new alternative. That only happens if we deal with the social part, right? Because oftentimes someone poses it in and maybe someone internally says, oh, but I have maybe a stupid idea. Well, stupid ideas also can lead to better outcomes and better alternatives. Now, since I consider sometimes myself to be in higher ranking, I just play the stupid person in the room sometimes and pose things they don't want. I try to meddle with languages, right? And try to say, oh, do you mean this word? And then someone will go, no, that's a stupid word. But maybe we can, right? That's what I'm trying to get them in. Trying to really get more alternatives out and find more alternatives. So there's one thing there as well on a decision. So we have alternatives, but we also have a thing called preferences. And if you're indifferent, there would be no need to make a decision. So if you have two alternative paths and you're like, yeah, whatever, well, then pick one. Right? So be mindful of the preferences, and we talked a lot about the social part just now. Try to find what are the needs of the people. So I have a big bias. 14 years ago, I started a company where me and two others had 140 services running each on a different IBM WebSphere instance, aka microservices, sort of. Partly it was the same adapter. So even though that went great, we took half a year to upgrade to a new version to WebSphere because there were so many cross-cutting inserts. My bias and my preferences is to start with monoliths. And can I tell you why? Can I explain it rational why? No, my irrationality here, and it is an irrationality because it's a preference, I've been through that experience. And I say a monolith was so much simpler. My previous client, we have a monolith with 14 bounded contexts. That was so much easier to just manage it all in monoliths. Still hard, not better maybe, but for me, that's the preference. So when I go to a decision, I say, every time I step into a new room or a new client, I say, just so you know, my preference is that we start with monoliths. But it's just my preference, and I would like to talk about that. But just be open about your preferences. Some people will just say, yeah, we need to do Kubernetes. Well, if you've seen the Git report, most people choose that technology to get better jobs. It's still a fine argument, but at least be honest about it, then we can have a conversation about it, right? It's still an argument. So preferences are arguments as long as we expose them and make them visible and talk about these arguments. And what I then do is find out what is actually your need below that. But it's a very important part, the preferences. So the third one here is information. Now, if you have certain information in a decision that doesn't change your decision, it's usually pretty worthless. So those are the three aspects of a decision, of the elements of a decision is alternatives. What can we do? Informations. This is what we get out of collaborative modeling, right? We try to get the information out. And through what we just discussed, the preferences, I try to probe that during that social part that we talk about in the book. Look at these patterns, what is going on, and try to do active listening and really look at how can I get these preferences out, and maybe write them down as heuristics. Find out, okay, this is your preference, why? Let's write that down, let's make them more clear. And then we have the logic, which is the process, right? So after we have all these things, we can make a decision actually. And that can be actually done in two ways. The first part, if we need to go fast, we will use heuristics. With heuristics, you can go fast. They're based on past events. They're sort of rules of thumb. And then we can go fast. Or we do more collaborative modeling. Domain message flow modeling is like based on domain storytelling, but looking at the messages that runs through can take a lot of time, but I am horrible at this word. Analyzing it out. Sorry for my Dutchness. But doing that more often can get you more information, more alternatives, and we're looking it out. But I will only do that when I'm dealing, for instance, with a core domain, because I want to be a little bit more sure. This is not, by the way, upfront design. This is upfront discovery still. Yeah? So I go through finding this out. And an easier tool would be a pro-con fix list, where we not only check the pros and the cons of an alternative, but also look at how can we fix a con, because that's so important. And then one thing to know is when you're making a decision, there's this thing in poker called resulting. A bad outcome doesn't necessarily mean you made the wrong decision. They're separated. Keep that in mind. So if we do the decision making correct and you get to a bad outcome, it's not due to the decision being made. It's due to maybe humans, but the world, right? So keep that in mind. So there's really a change in the quality of the decision is being confused with the quality of the outcome. Good. So some final part going your way. Now we have all this done, right? We can make decisions. So who can decide now? Who's dealing with this currently, by the way? What I usually see when we start collaborative designing, but maybe this also has to do with more of a Dutch culture where we try to be egalitarian, but we're actually not.
Everyone needs to agree, right? Everyone needs to be on.
So who can decide now is a very important aspect here. What we always try to do in a collaborative modeling is make it very clear how much power you have and who has that power. So we can have very lower buy-in from our audience or from the collaborative modeling, which is autocratic, right? It's just a command. We're doing collaborative modeling. In the end, I will decide. At least it's clear. If it's someone person in hire and someone who pays me, I'm fine with that. It can be a proposal. So sometimes I go out with managers, try to get everyone's information out. We come with one proposal and say, if you don't have any serious objections, we're just going to do it, period. Right? That's a proposal. Then you have suggestions, intentions are clear, and idea is just, here's my problem, let's go at it. Make it clear. I worked with someone who came in, and he says, hey, Kenny, I think we should do this. What do you think about it? And I said, well, I'm Dutch. It's a bad decision. This was my CTO. This is a bad decision. We've worked at it for 6 months, but, oh yeah, we're going to do it. Okay, if you would just go in and says, Kenny, this is what we're going to do, I'm fine. You pay me. I'm okay with that. And then give me some time to rant about it because I've worked for my ass off for 6 months. And then it's like, okay, and then you ask me what do I need, and then I go along with you. Fine. I'm okay that other people can make decisions if they're higher in power than me. But at least be honest and be clear about that, right? There's always one decision making there. Now, I like Andrew's book. He talked about this earlier, right? To change that decision-making process, and this is what I'm also doing. And the thing about this here, it's making it clear again. Who takes responsibility? Who's owning something? That's underneath there. As long as that's clear, people can take the responsibility they need. That's perfect. The thing is, if you make decisions, what you want to do, and this comes from deep democracy, is first you want to gain all that views. You want to find the alternatives, saying no, saying hey, right? All that ranking and the conflict going on. Then we try to spread it. So if someone who doesn't talk a lot, all of a sudden talks, I try to spread that out. I try to amplify that voice because, hey, finally a person is speaking up. I need to reinforce that in a way. Then deep democracy says, when you vote for a majority, you can say, okay, the majority wins, and now we're done, right? It doesn't work like that because there's still a minority. So what we always want you to do, no matter how you take the decision, from a command or from the bottom one, I would always ask, what will it take for you to go along? I had this people deciding between trunk-based and GitLab. There were 2 people who didn't want to go to trunk-based out of the 9. Okay, done, right? So we asked them actively, what will it take for you to go along? These were the front-enders. They were saying, well, you know, I don't know how to do feature flagging yet in the front end. Okay, so you would need to know that first to go along. So yeah, okay, then the new vote, I included it, we're going to go to trunk-based development and first find this out. Everyone agrees, and then everyone agreed, and then they started battling the PO, which is great, right? So regardless of how or who made the decision, always ask, what do you need to go along with this decision? And this is the same in a pro-con fix list, right? There's always cons, but see how you can neutralize these cons for people. It doesn't mean that now they say, go left. No, 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 no. We're doing this one, but how can I make your life easier to go along with me? That, most of the time, already helps. And if someone just needs to rant about how that impacts them, that's already a lot helpful. And you can see that decision will become easier. Right, Evelyn?
Sure.
So, collaborative modeling to redesign a system works, right?
It works, sure, but.
But.
Always a but.
There's a but.
As we already mentioned, redesigning a system is a socio-technical happening. And with all of some of the challenges, because this is just a very small part of all of the challenges that you can encounter, but you have to see how to balance everything that's going on. And that is, especially when you start doing that, that's very overwhelming. But what we found, and what hopefully others will find when they do this, is that over time that you will find yourself making decisions in a similar way. And that is eventually what you want, because then that means that your design decisions will become more sustainable. And that is, well, the ultimate goal, let's say. But it takes time and effort to get there. So to close off, if you really want teams to function as proper product teams, which still needs to be defined, right? But you need to have that socio-technical perspective, and not just a perspective, not just talking about it and thinking about it, but also seeing what does that really mean in terms of how we as humans should collaborate and behave in that sense. So I think that's it. We are in time. I'm very surprised. And we want to finish with one final word of advice. And that is leave the judging to the cats, because they are way better at that than we are,
yes.
as you can see. And there's a QR code for the book, right? Yes, and that's it for now. So we still have time for questions, if there are.
One more minute.
Wow, how proud are you?
Good behavior, good behavior.
Well done. There are some questions. So one of them is, should the team share their shadows with each other before collaborating and modeling?
Do you want to take this?
Yeah, shoot is hard, of course, but I think it helps if they are more explicit. And it's hard to do that when you're just newly working together, for example. But talking about that, and there are ways of getting them explicit, so it's not just, hey, what's your shadow? That doesn't really work. But things like check-ins and sense-making exercise, and there are all sorts of tools that you can use to get them more in the open. We also describe them in the book, but definitely it helps. If you, it creates shared understanding, and that works. And
be careful. One thing to note: this is ranking again, right? If I'm lower in rank, I'm more afraid to tell these things.
Yeah.
If people didn't tell it yet, that means that they're too afraid to speak up. If you force them to, you'll get the wrong answer. Yes. Forcing people to share gets you the wrong answer. So one tip, and we never go to some person, hey, you've been quiet today, can you speak up? Do you want to say something? What can I say? What am I allowed to say? So please, when you do collaborative modeling, never go directly to a person. That's a heuristic. Never go spotlight a person if this person doesn't spotlight themselves. Always announce something to the group. Do you want, as a group, to say something? And then stay quiet. See if someone pops in.
I think that was it. Let us thank Henny and Evelyn again. Oh, sorry, there's a question. Okay, let's.
We like that. It's still in red, so
if you have time. So
yes.
Still not.
Back in 2016, I was asked by an organization to map out the concept of culture. And the only way I could do this was to get two conflicting groups in the room. They were Brexiteers and Remainers. They would not agree on anything in terms of narrative, but we were able to map out the concept of culture through the map. Mm-hmm. Now, I've used maps for conflict resolution, and now David Ease teaches that at Harvard and UCL. How much have you... Can you give us some of your experiences with modeling and conflict resolution?
In under 1 minute.
In under 1 minute. Well, I think the most important part is the higher above you the chain it is more solutions. I haven't done the mapping on conflicts, but for me it all drills down to the needs underneath. If we can first agree on the needs, right? Because they both probably have the same needs. If we start from there, then we can talk more easily about the solutions. in event storming, you might add like hotspots or these kinds of extra comments to look at the conflict. But it usually goes to the observing the patterns and stating patterns that are helping them to get people, we call it over the edge. When people get into a conflict, they're like, okay, I'm going to look at my phone, right? That's edge behavior. So telling that to a group, like, hey, I see a lot of people putting their phone out now. That's called a climate report, and staying quiet and see if people want to go over that edge and talk about the lower part. And then I think when there's information there, that you can map out in many ways, I guess. But first, people need to be okay with going over that edge of a conflict. If they feel too afraid to go over it, I'll stop and we'll continue in a very non-progressive way, I think, because we need to first deal with the conflict and then we can actually make better decisions. I hope that answers your questions in a way.
I really hope it does as well.
And else we're gonna...
Let us thank Evelyn and Kenny again.
Thank you.